Donald Trump claimed Washington, D.C. was on the brink of chaos, threatening a takeover over violent crimes that never happened. As false reports flooded social media, investigators uncovered a shocking web of deception designed to manipulate both citizens and leaders. What started as fear quickly spiraled into a political crisis that could have changed the nation forever. In early 2025, Washington, D.C. seemed calm on the surface, but a quiet storm was brewing that no one could ignore. The city streets were filled with the usual bustle of commuters, tourists, and government workers, yet a strange tension lingered in the air. Official crime reports painted a picture of stability. Violent crime was actually slightly lower than the previous year, but that reality was being drowned out by a rising tide of alarming social media posts. Graphic videos, blurry images, and dramatic eyewitness accounts claimed that attacks and robberies were happening everywhere. People shared the content without verification, and within hours, these posts spread to millions, creating a perception of chaos that did not exist. The situation escalated when a prominent political figure seized upon the social media frenzy, amplifying the stories and issuing dire warnings. Speeches and press statements painted Washington as a city on the brink, claiming citizens were in immediate danger. Despite the lack of evidence, the rhetoric was convincing to many, and the city's residents began to panic. Streets that were normally busy with tourists and workers started emptying as fear of violent crime gripped the population. Families canceled plans, schools considered closures, and businesses debated whether to increase security measures. The city was caught in a strange duality, outwardly normal, yet internally tense and anxious. Meanwhile, journalists and investigators tried to fact-check the claims, but the sheer volume of content made it nearly impossible to keep up. Each day, new posts appeared, more graphic and detailed than the last, making the misinformation seem increasingly credible. Security advisors quietly warned political leaders that acting on unverified claims could create a dangerous precedent. Still, the pressure to respond mounted, fueled by viral posts and amplified fear. Then, images of military-style vehicles near government buildings appeared online, intensifying the panic. Social media users claimed the government was preparing for civil unrest, though in reality, the trucks were part of routine federal exercises. The combination of fake crime reports and misleading visuals created a perfect storm of fear, uncertainty, and urgency. It became clear that someone was orchestrating a campaign of misinformation, carefully crafted to provoke strong reactions from both the public and political leaders. Ordinary citizens were caught in the middle, unsure whom to trust, while those in power faced the delicate challenge of responding to a threat that existed only in perception. The stage was set for an unprecedented crisis, one in which lies could shape the course of real-world events, and no one could be certain what would happen next. As the false reports continued to spread, investigators began to see patterns emerging. The violent crime stories were not random. They were carefully timed and strategically posted to gain maximum attention. Each claim was written with vivid detail: a supposed mugging in a busy downtown street, a violent carjacking outside a school, an armed robbery at a convenience store. Some posts even included doctored videos or altered photos to give them the appearance of authenticity. Ordinary citizens scrolling through social media were often unable to distinguish fact from fiction. The result was widespread fear, with people locking doors, avoiding streets, and sharing posts as warnings to friends and family. Political operatives noticed the effect almost immediately. Public outrage and anxiety could be used to justify extreme actions. Within days, discussions began about taking control of the city to protect citizens from escalating violence. Pundits debated the situation on live television, emphasizing the need for urgent measures, while officials in D.C. scrambled to assess the credibility of the reports. The media frenzy only added fuel to the fire, amplifying the sense of danger and making it appear as if the city was on the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, security advisors worked frantically behind the scenes. Deploying troops or declaring a state of emergency without a verified threat could trigger a national crisis. Yet, hesitation seemed politically dangerous. Social media had already created a perception that the city was unsafe, and ignoring it could be seen as negligence. The false narrative was gaining momentum, driven not by real events but by perception alone. Ordinary citizens were caught in the middle, unsure whether to trust official statements or the sensational claims they saw online. By the end of the week, the tension had reached unprecedented levels. Traffic cameras showed normal activity, hospitals reported no unusual incidents, and police logs confirmed that crime rates remained consistent with previous months. Yet images of supposed chaos continued to circulate. The misinformation campaign had become a self-perpetuating machine. Each new post, tweet, and share made the next one seem more credible. Analysts began to warn that the situation could escalate further if not carefully managed. The city's leaders faced an impossible choice: confront the lies and risk political backlash, or act on them and risk a constitutional crisis. In the background, the orchestrators of the campaign remained hidden. Their goal was clear: create fear, provoke reaction, and manipulate perception to serve a political agenda. As the city teetered on the edge of panic, it became evident that the conflict was no longer just about crime. It was about control, influence, and the power of misinformation to shape reality itself. Washington, D.C. was at a tipping point, and the next move could change everything. As the misinformation campaign intensified, a startling discovery emerged. Investigators uncovered internal communications suggesting that some of the false reports had been carefully coordinated by political insiders. The posts weren't just random fabrications, they were part of a deliberate strategy designed to provoke fear and push leaders toward drastic action. Analysts described it as a psychological operation aimed at manipulating both public perception and political behavior. Every doctored image, every fake video, and every exaggerated story was part of a meticulously crafted narrative meant to appear spontaneous. Public anxiety soared as news outlets covered the so-called escalating violence in Washington. Screens across the nation showed images of streets supposedly littered with chaos. Even though police records and hospital reports confirmed normal activity, citizens began reporting incidents that never occurred, influenced by the fear permeating social media. Schools increased security, businesses installed surveillance cameras, and neighborhoods organized self-defense patrols. The city's calm exterior was deceptive. Beneath it, tension was mounting to a dangerous level. The situation reached a new level of urgency when rumors began circulating that the federal government was planning a preemptive takeover of key areas in the city to restore order. Troop movements and emergency preparedness exercises were cited as evidence. Even though most of these actions were routine and unrelated to crime, the perception of an impending takeover sparked debates in newsrooms, on social media, and in homes across the country. Citizens were gripped by the possibility that Washington could erupt into a conflict zone at any moment. Investigators realized the campaign was not only targeting the public, but also exploiting the fears of high-level political figures. By carefully selecting which stories would reach influential leaders, the orchestrators ensured that even experienced officials were swayed by the fabricated narrative. Every tweet and viral post served a dual purpose: to amplify public fear and to pressure decision-makers into overreacting. Behind the scenes, analysts and journalists worked tirelessly to expose the truth, but the misinformation was spreading faster than the facts could keep up. Social media algorithms prioritized sensational content, ensuring that lies outpaced corrections. Ordinary citizens, unable to distinguish reality from fabrication, became both victims and unwilling participants in the unfolding drama. By the end of the week, it became clear that the danger was no longer just theoretical. The combination of fear, manipulation, and political pressure created a volatile situation, one misstep away from triggering a major crisis. Washington, D.C. was caught in the middle of a manufactured storm, and the line between truth and fiction had blurred beyond recognition. The city stood on the edge, unaware that the very forces claiming to protect it were the ones orchestrating its peril. Investigators finally began to piece together the full scope of the scheme. What had started as a few exaggerated posts had evolved into a sophisticated, multi-layered campaign of deception. Analysts discovered that the false reports were not random acts by internet trolls, but the product of carefully coordinated efforts by political advisors and online strategists. These operatives had used advanced tools to manipulate algorithms, ensuring that each story reached key audiences and gained maximum visibility. Every viral post, doctored video, and fabricated eyewitness account was deliberately designed to provoke fear and uncertainty, creating a climate where extreme measures could be justified. The revelation shocked the public. People realized that the narrative justifying a potential takeover of Washington was entirely fabricated. Streets that had seemed unsafe were, in reality, calm. Hospitals, police logs, and crime statistics confirmed what officials had long known: the city remained stable. Yet despite the exposure of the truth, the damage had already been done. Public trust in official statements had eroded, and fear continued to spread through communities like an invisible contagion. Citizens had been conditioned to question the very institutions meant to protect them, and the consequences of that mistrust were unpredictable. Adding another twist, a whistleblower released a cache of internal communications revealing that the misinformation campaign had targeted not only the public, but also the political figure who had threatened action. Every viral post had been calculated to exploit existing anxieties and provoke an overreaction. Analysts described it as psychological manipulation on a massive scale, fear weaponized to control behavior and influence decisions. The campaign had succeeded in creating a situation in which perception had begun to shape reality itself. Even as the public digested these revelations, debates raged over accountability. Who was responsible for creating such chaos? Could the media have done more to verify claims before amplifying them? And most importantly, how had a false narrative gained so much power so quickly? Investigators worked tirelessly to track funding sources, online networks, and the operatives behind the campaign. They discovered layers of planning that suggested domestic and international coordination, demonstrating just how vulnerable society had become to digital manipulation. Despite these efforts, the city remained tense. Residents were wary, political leaders cautious, and the media hyper-focused on every development. The entire episode had exposed a dangerous reality. Lies could be engineered to provoke real-world consequences, and even the most stable systems were vulnerable. Washington, D.C. had survived the storm, but the underlying threat lingered, a reminder that truth could be manipulated, and perception could be weaponized with devastating effect. By late March, the storm of misinformation that had gripped Washington, D.C. finally began to subside, but the city remained tense. The political figure who had threatened a takeover publicly declared the situation resolved, citing new intelligence that revealed the true state of affairs. Streets slowly returned to normal, schools reopened fully, and businesses resumed routine operations. Yet beneath the surface, the effects of the fabricated crisis lingered. Citizens who had been caught up in fear were now grappling with the reality that much of what they had believed was deliberately false. The psychological impact of weeks of anxiety and distrust could not be erased overnight. Investigators continued their work, piecing together the intricate web of manipulation that had nearly pushed the nation to the edge. They uncovered layers of coordination involving political advisors, media operatives, and online strategists, some of whom had worked across national borders. Funding networks and anonymous accounts had been carefully structured to make the campaign appear spontaneous, giving it an air of authenticity. Every detail had been calculated to provoke fear, influence leaders, and manipulate public perception. The deeper investigators dug, the more apparent it became that the crisis had been engineered with precision. In the aftermath, questions about accountability dominated political and social discourse. Who should be held responsible for creating widespread panic? How could the media and social platforms prevent such manipulation in the future? And most importantly, how had perception been allowed to override reality so completely? Analysts warned that even after the truth was revealed, the echoes of the false narrative could persist in public memory, shaping opinions and behaviors for months or even years. A final twist emerged when officials discovered that the orchestrators had intentionally targeted the political figure who had amplified the false claims. Internal communications revealed that fear had been weaponized not only against the public but against the decision-makers themselves, ensuring an overreaction that would heighten the perceived crisis. The entire episode was a lesson in how easily reality could be reshaped by lies when amplified through powerful digital networks. Though Washington returned to normalcy on the surface, the scars of manipulation remained. Citizens were more skeptical, political leaders more cautious, and media outlets more aware of their responsibility. The events had revealed the fragility of trust in a hyperconnected world, where perception could be engineered to create real consequences. What began as a wave of false crime reports had become a global lesson in the dangers of misinformation. A chilling reminder that even the most stable institutions could be shaken when fear is manufactured and reality is rewritten. The city survived, but the shadow of deception lingered, a warning that the next storm could be even harder to resist.